Dan Wetmore, a member of Southwest Writers and New Mexico State Poetry Society, has been writing verse, both the rambling and the regimented, since childhood. He's authored 2 volumes of poetry, My Mother's Gentle Unbecoming and Phobudenophobia. I think I said that right. And it's nearing is nearing completion on a third, On Our Knees in Ironies.
So I left off. So I left off the title to free or not too free verse because I thought a critical mass of puns might kill some folks today. But and I renamed it The Pros and Cons of Fixed and Free Poetry for Readers and Writers. Because a lot of times we focus on one or the other, but I found that a lot of the pros and cons of the majority of pros and cons for fixed and free poetry are shared by both. So get double duty out of it. So next slide, please. So let's define some terms first. For today's purposes, fixed equals patterned. That is, you have certain elements which are regularly repeated, and free is not, unpatterned. So, the opposite, which makes it pretty simple, kind of a yin and yang relationship. Free poetry might contain some pattern elements, just not in any uniform recurrence. Next slide. So what are those elements? Let's dig down to them. Starting with the aspect of the poem's construction, its physical form, there are 2 sub-aspects. Next slide. Sound primarily and sight secondarily, since script is derivative of speech. Next slide, please. And compared to script's one focus, topography, the layout, speech has 2. Expression, how forcefully the air is exhaled from the lungs, kind of boring stuff, and articulation, how the mouth parts shape the sound generated. This will all become clear later. Note that the sight elements are lost to the audience if the work's being recited for them rather than read by them. Similarly, the first sound element, rhythm, and its cousin, pacing, can be easily lost on the audience if they're only reading the work and not hearing it. So the takeaway there is when it comes to fixed poetry, heck, any poetry, discount your dislike of a piece if you haven't both read and heard it. Because if you've only done one or the other, you've only had half of the work. And then we move on to the elements of pattern. And this is where things get busy. Yeah. So as a writer, you can organize and choose your words and their placement based solely on, oh my gosh, number of syllables per line, number of feet per line, rhyme, whether it's a shaped poem, a kitty cat playing with a ball or a diamond or a star or a reverse pyramid. Same line starting each stanza. First line is the last line. Specific letter starting each line. Number of letters per word. Number of words per line. Number of lines per stanza. Number of stanzas per poem. If you can think of a way to chop up in little pieces and recombine it, it's been done. Next slide, please. But it doesn't just stop there because additional concerns are factored in the way of subject matter, genre in prose terms, and tone, since a single emotional tone can be sustained for 50 to 500 words without taxing credibility. Can't get away with that with a novel. You've got to have some pacing, but you can just do a single note with a poem and it can be quite effective. And some requirements tax the definition of fixed poem that I'm using, namely the last 3, which if you've got your binoculars, you can see those. Basically, title must be uppercase if it's a clarity pyramid. Single word title if it's a Pleiades, or no title if it's a haiku or cross limerick. And those don't fit my definition of a fixed poem because they're not recurring elements within a fixed poem. They're just one-time occurrence. So just to give you a sense, Placidas author Wayne Lee's Dining on Salt is an 80 poem collection comprised solely of septets. And in addition to those, he has an appendix describing 40 variations on that 7-line form alone. And in Miller Williams' Patterns of Poetry, he covers another 90 fixed forms and subvarieties, 26 based on the length of the stanza alone. And if you go to the editor of the Writer's Digest list on YouTube or Google, you'll find 168 poetic forms. So taken all together, you have a lot of options. And so if you say, I don't like poetry, maybe you just haven't looked exhaustively and found the one that's out there waiting for you. Your soulmate is out there. You just got to keep looking. So Carl Sandburg once said, writing free verse is like playing tennis without a net. We're getting into the pros and the cons now that we've got our definitions over with. Without set parameters, how do you know what's in bounds? What counts as good? Which words to use? How long to make the lines? Where to break them into? When to stop? And in the absence of rhythm or rhyme for a reader who happens to find, if the reader happens to find the message cryptic or convoluted, there might be no other features there for them to enjoy. So if, as either a reader or a writer, you think lack of uniformity, of regularity, of symmetry equates to a piece that's unworked or incomplete, that's a negative in the free verse column. At the same time, the writer of free verse who can't rely on the soothing strains of iambic pentameter to woo the reader, or maybe even crack the rhymes with oranges conundrum, working without a net, becomes highly motivated to polish the sentiments, the voice, and the tone, because that's all they've got to go on. And since fixed and free forms are each negatively defined by the other, what's a negative for free is a positive for the fixed. So you only have to generate half the list and then just put a negative in front of it, and voila, you've got the entire thing. Fixed poetry offers parameters, clear boundaries for the author. It's like bowling with bumpers up. You cannot throw a gutter ball. Even if your message is confused or the delivery falls flat, you'll still get partial credit for the elements of pattern that you did bring to the page. So neither writer nor reader is likely to walk away empty-handed. For example, next slide, please. Nocturnal phases. Old man moon on time and space did beam with sallow, ravaged face. No place to call another's home, he alone to all was known. And all who knew his timeless state would curse and quake and moan their fate, that they must pass while he lived on, till break of day from time's first dawn. But moon admonished groundlings low, you miss the fates that we each know, for one must feel but one's demise, while I, on the night of a world, must rise. So the regular cadence of the heroic couplets, pairs of rhymed lines of the same length, alternating unstressed and stressed syllables, provide a regular cadence and anticipation of a rhyme, and a satisfaction if it's a good one, and or delight if it's an improbable one. And that can give you a sensation akin to sitting in a rocking chair, or lying in a hammock, being pushed on a swing. So even if you find the observation uninteresting, you might still get some enjoyment from the delivery method. Next slide, please. So, enveloper Binion, I do not like thee, Dr. Fell. Exactly why, I cannot tell. But this I know, and know full well, I do not like you, Dr. Fell. And in the rondelay, I never meant for you to go. The thing you heard, I never meant for you to hear. The night you went away, I knew our whole absurd, sweet world had fallen with a word I never meant. So here we have not only rhyme, the repetition of a consonant vowel combination, we also have repetition of entire lines in the second one, which can be very effective. And the third only works in the short line form of poetry. The repetitions and the slight variations in connotation, owing to the phrase's different placements within each sentence. I never meant starts the first sentence, it's in the middle of the second sentence, and it's at the very end of the third sentence. And that gives it different connotations, such that even though it's the exact same words, you're hearing them three different ways. And so it's the irregularity within the regularity, which kind of gives it that sort of piquance. And that would be lost visually in prose, where the line lengths and the breaks are all uniformly and arbitrarily set by the paper's margins. The predictability is enticing, but it can become addictive for the same reason. And pursued too far, it can turn sing-song feeling, giving the work a sort of a frivolous feel. That's intended in this first one, Dr. Fell, but where it's not intended, that can tempt folks to dismiss tightly fixed cadence and rhyming out of hand as not really being serious work, or cause them to become so preoccupied with the metrics that they become deaf to the message. Like when someone says all the time and you can't hear any of the words in between the ums. Preoccupied with the vehicle rather than its occupant. Now, for the composer of free verse, the situation is reversed. As far as regular cadence and vowel consonant mirroring, their work is the definition of unpredictable. On the other hand, it'll never be accused of being overpredictable. Moderation is the key. The objection to the regularity of rhyme isn't a complaint against its use as a seasoning. Otherwise, every poem which ever rhymed would be subject to that criticism. It's simply a complaint against over-seasoning, how much you use, not the fact that you use it. So don't throw out the baby with the bath. Just throw out more of the bath if the baby's over its head. But adding complexity, more patterns, or more frequent use of a rhyming element or a pattern element can tie the writer's hands. The perfect word for the sentiment doesn't have the same ending sound as the one from the previous line. Or cutting syllables to keep the scansion clean takes the expression from being as simple as possible to being simpler than possible, i.e. not possible. So the author who gets greedy and flies too high, like Icarus, suffers a fall. Next slide, please. An alternate method of diffusing the criticism that a form is formulaic is the self-deprecating approach. Make it obvious that you know you fell short, admitting your human limitations, hopefully gaining more connection with your reader that way. When the goal is to make them laugh, it goes as far as parody by understatement or exaggeration, for which fixed poems having the most elements are the most effective. So my love has grown from one small trickle, again the iambic, since you rode by on your own tricycle. Yeah, it's supposed to be tricycle, but it's tricycle. And you can see the difference there in that second to last foot. There was a young man from Japan whose limericks would never scan, and when they asked why, he said, I do try, but when I get to the last line, I try to fit in as many words as I can. Yeah. So we've got the one there that it's got the wrong rhyme. The second one has got the wrong scanning, the wrong cadence, tempo. And then in the third one on the left there, we've got one that is nothing but rhyme. Well, it's beyond rhyme. It's false rhyme because it's the exact same word in all 5 lines. There was an old man with a beard, a funny old man with a beard. He had a big beard, a great big old beard, that amusing old man with a beard. And it's like, I get it. And then the last, no rhyme whatsoever. Although the scanning gives you're always waiting for that rhyme because it scans perfectly. So you're like, okay, here it comes. And you never get it. There was an old man of St. Bees who was stung in the arm by a wasp. When asked, does it hurt? He replied, no, it doesn't. I'm so glad it wasn't a hornet. Okay. What are you going to do? Question about the first one, though. In the first line, in the first poem, the lines aren't the same length. The second has an extra syllable right there in the third foot. So you'd still have the tricycle trip or stumble if you took out the extra syllable, and it would read a little tighter, and that might accentuate the fact that one of those syllables is just off. It's stressed when it should be unstressed. So which would you think would be the one that you could most easily get rid of to improve this in that second line? Okay. On. Okay. So my love has grown from one small trickle since you rode by your get rid of by. Okay. My love has grown from one small trickle since you rode by. No, it's hard to do. My love has grown from one small trickle since you rode on your own tricycle. Okay. Yeah, that works. That works. Yeah. Do you think that having a half stumble before the real stumble is more likely to get, oh, what's he doing here? Or is it likely that you might just run right past the tricycle and not even notice the joke that he's making if it scanned perfectly up to that point? I don't know. I don't know if he was being sloppy or if he was being smart. Would have to ask whoever it was. So let me ask you this. Why can't you get rid of the word own? Okay. What what does his own tricycle tell you about the author at the time that he's talking about? He's also on a tricycle. So, as written, this poem is a story about two little kids growing up together and it blossoming from friendship into something more. And that's really sweet. How old is this person who was watching this little girl or little boy on a tricycle if you take out the word own? You don't know. It could be a pedophile. Some guy in his 60s or 50s or 40s or teens or what have you. So I think it was really smart that he did put in that extra syllable because, you know, if you look at the world cynically, you say, oh, that's dark. And it's not supposed to be. So moral of the story, when you've only got 2 lines and maybe 12 words, every single one counts. There is no fat to be cut. It's all muscle. So be careful that you don't. So next, please. So haiku. These gentlemen poke fun at one stated requirement of haiku with one of them with his non-title titles and the extreme brevity of the form and contrast it to another via mashup. So tourists wait in line. I'll just let you read, yeah. I don't want to stomp on them. Yeah. So if in doubt that you've got it as tight and as clean as you can as a writer, you can always be safe by going over the top and making fun of yourself, because then people aren't yelling at you for, you know, doing it wrong. They're laughing with you for making them laugh for doing it wrong. Exactly. Yeah. Moving on to another. If you're hesitant to explore poetry because you barely have the time for the prose you want to create, don't look at poetry as an additional demand on your time, but as an alternate response to that demand. Next slide, please. Gold watch at 60, which is, hell, I retired at 50. Gold watch at 60, retired so early, what's living for? A flashlight burning in a drawer. Yeah. You know, you could write this long, drawn-out essay bemoaning the fact that you've lost your social standing, that you're no longer in a position of authority or power, that you no longer have influence in any sphere whatsoever. Is that telling? Sorry. Or you could just let it distill down, you know, like a chemist in a lab who basically boils off the solvent to reveal the crystals that were in the solvent, and you can look at their glistening facets and their deep, clear colors. Or in the domestic sciences, you can take that stew water and you can add a little flour and some spices, and you can reduce it down to make a broth, which might even be more tasty than the meat that it's going on. And the beauty of it is since you're only dealing with about 15 words here, uh, you can do that all in your head while you're driving, while you're mowing the lawn, while you're doing the dishes. You can edit the entire thing 50 times in an hour right up here. So you can multitask very easily with poetry to basically say the same things just in a much more tight, concise way. So it's got power to it. Next slide, please. What is an epigram? A dwarfish whole, its body brevity and wit, its soul. So Mr. Coleridge, he's given us a dictionary definition of the thing as the thing. So it's meta, maybe twice, which is kind of cool. Next slide, please. In the epitaph arena, time will rust the sharpest sword, time will consume the strongest cord. That which molders hemp and steel, mortal arm and nerve must feel. Elegiac stands on a photograph of Ethel Rosenberg. Remember, one of the 2 Americans who had the death penalty for being a traitor, treason? It sits on top my desk, but is faced so that the sun will not cause it to fade. The photographs we save are like to taste of honey on a sharpened razor blade. Yeah. The common wisdom. Their marriage is a good one. In our eyes, what makes a marriage good? Well, that the tether fray, but not break. and that they stay together. One should be watching while the other dies. Not in the gross way, but in the nobody wants to go out alone. Everybody wants somebody by their side. Now, granted, these aren't so much endorsements of one type of poetry, fixed over free, because you could easily do this without the rhyme scheme and the scansion and get a lot of punch to it. Not quite as much, but a lot. But given that fixed poetry does give it that little extra bit of punch, and it does have so many established short forms, couplets, quatrains, 2 lines, 4 lines, 31 letters. If it's a waka, that's it. That's all you get. Then yeah, why not go ahead and you don't have to reinvent the wheel to do this if you're using fixed poetry. So next slide, please. An aeronaut to his love. Even the sonnets, 14 lines can be spare. And yes, this is just 3 short sentences turned sideways. But if it catches your eye differently, shakes you out of predictability, makes you regard the words less than passively, and slows your reading so you will dwell longer on the sentiment, it's done its job. An aeronaut to his love. I, through blue sky, fly to you. Why? Sweet love, feet move too slow. And finally, let me check my time here. How many of you like word puzzles? Okay, well then I've got some fixed poems for you. Next slide, please. So they take place at the stanza level and the line level and even down at the word level. So if you like crosswords or Scrabble or Sudoku, then the envelope version that we had before with that fellow that used the same, Dr. Fell used the same line as the first and last lines, that's an envelope, or the terza rima or the snake rhyme, they all work by building on what came before. Everything is attached to a previous line. So it has to build on each other. You can't have the last line without the intervening lines to give it direction and grounding. At the word level, if you want to unscramble the words, well, then you're doing the jumble or the wordle. And that's anagrams. 5 letters, and how many words can you get out of it? Live versus evil, for if it's 4. So if you want a ready form to basically, as a reader, as a player of these puzzles or games, you're ingesting, you're the customer, you're imbibing them. But as the writer, you can be the creator of them. And that'll just kind of maybe scratch the rest of the itch that you have when you play them. If it's finding the words, word search or boggle, well, that's an acrostic, palindromes, blackout being where you take a book or a magazine page or a newspaper page and you just find words or even letters that you like that would make a poem, and you just black out all the other words around them, or eraser, the opposite, where you erase the words. And then if you're looking to find a place for the words as opposed to finding the words themselves, find a home for them, well, Mad Libs do that for you. And so that's like doing a word bank, but a little bit in reverse. So next slide, please. So the terza rima on the left, I'm gonna have to confirm my notes so I don't screw up what I'm saying. In the terza rima, the middle line of each 3-line stanza, it's kind of hard to uncompress here, but you see that ABA, they're all triplets. They're all tercettes with a terza rima, hence the terza in Italian. So the ABA is the first verse, BAB is the second verse, BCB the third, CBC, and so on and so on and so on. And each one is linked by the line, like a chain, by the lines that come before the last line. Each verse has its own rhyme sound, A, B, C, D, E, F, but each verse has the first line is the previous verse's rhyme sound, and the last line is the next verse's rhyme sound, so that they're kind of linked in that way, which is kind of what crosswords, with half closed eyes and an open mind, kind of what they do. Yeah, they all join words by overlapping letters or numbers in the case of Sudoku. And some fixed poems join stanzas by overlapping rhymes. And in the snake beside it, Each stanza includes the rhymes of the succeeding and proceeding stanzas, succeeding and preceding stanzas. So yeah, it's a double link, like if you're making chainmail for the Renaissance Fair, you got to go over two links. So next slide, please. So everybody know what this is? As a form, the name of the form? You're all busy reading. I caught you. This is acrostic. Yeah, where the you read letters down the lines and you get a word. And the first one is a double acrostic. Again, if you want to flex that you got the ability, you make different words or the same word at both ends of the poem, or you put them in the middle so that if you're doing that word puzzle, word search, and you got to you're allowed to zigzag instead of going in a diagonal or a horizontal or a vertical, then you might end up with the second one here. So yeah. And it's hard to read that second one, overpopulation and art. And it's just sort of a commentary on our environment and ourselves in it. And so, yeah. And then I've only got one palindrome, but boy, this is my favorite, by Lee Mercer. A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. And it reads the same way backwards, which doesn't even seem possible to me, but it does. So if you like, looking for the words in the word search, then write the words in a word search. Make yourself a word search poem and give it to your friends, and they can enjoy it too. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to, yeah. So yeah, reads the same backwards and forwards. Crazy stuff. He said in an interview, he kind of muddled over that for about 6 months before he got it all worked out. Next slide, please. So since it is Valentine's Day, we were talking about, word, I don't know what the right word for them, but is a word bank poem where, somebody gives you a certain number of words and you're supposed to, it's, or a writing prompt that you get in a writing group, hey, write something about, cats or hypotenuses or, anything. And they give you a word, or if they want to up the difficulty levels, they give you multiple words. So back in 2004, there was a radio contest and the lady said, okay, folks, write a love poem to your significant other, and it has to have the words polka dots, margarine, fork, teacup, and grasshopper. And I thought, okay, she's probably looking for something cute or silly, but maybe I could defy those low expectations and actually come up with something that had some weight to it. And so, next slide, this is what I got. Because love finds life with you. A purpose to years, which before your vibrant hues were just so many photographs of pale polka dots passing. A semblance of sense, gifting taste to otherwise margarine moments. The ability to embrace fully what was once soup taken with a fork, a draught from a teacup, a grasshopper's leap to the moon. An enduring stillness for a simple man who needs no flash and volume, just quiet reassurance of your cradling warmth. Through days and nights enough, all that I can find, to find all of love with you. So, and next slide, please. As far as puzzle poems, this one is my absolute favorite because it's a limerick where every word has been replaced with a mathematical symbol. Anybody want to take a guess? Okay, here it is. A dozen, a gross, and a score, plus 3 times the square root of 4, divided by 7, plus 5 times 11, is 9 squared and not a bit more. I can't take the credit for that. Again, this was Mr. Oh, next slide, please. Again, this was the man who brought you Panama, a canal, Panama. Yeah, Mr. Lee Mercer came up with this one as well. So, and the cool thing about this is it doesn't just scan perfectly and rhyme perfectly. It's also a valid equation. Both sides add up to 81. So, don't know how long it took him to do that, but. And with that, we've come full circle. So next slide. What questions do you have for me? Actually, we got like 15 minutes left. I can do the bit that I took out in case it got to be too long if you want. Okay, okay. One moment. Keep going. Yes, right here. Perfect. Okay, so talking about another bonus or a pro or a plus to fixed poetry is that it's easily memorizable. Memorizable. Um, Once upon a time, there was some comedian at the Air Force Personnel Center office who decided it would be a fun thing to put a guy with dual degrees in philosophy and literally give him the keys to Armageddon, which prompted me to spend uncounted hours sitting 60 feet below ground, wondering about the ethical conundrum of mutually assured destruction. And this was one of the dividends. Cerberus in deep kennel lay, hard champing at his chain, lolling there in disarray, three heads, all insane. A mythic beastie, sulphur sired, bedraggled, singed, and charred, and tasked, his countenance never tired, perdition's gate to guard. Ingenious ploy, I give it nod, that lashing of three wills, I'd numbered four best odds at odds, thus dispositioned ill. He kept him pacing, snapping taut, full at his serious play. All knew that none would venture aught without his bite to pay. And yet, it seems a strange defense. Its logic on me? Lost. The keeping of malevolence and boarding at such cost. When known the while, our charge steadfast, hard bred to stand us lee, at first ken of long shadows cast, would from our company flee. It bursts a master's harried straits, hold fury ill in hand, or loose the hound that evil baits, which evil baits, run rampant across the land. When man's best fiends his only friend, then's seen the coin he pays, reluctant dawning in the end, offense will catch both ways. Prometheus, you found new fire, a fate revised in kind. Embrace the beast with wilding eye, hope yours it does not find. The things of gods, best left to them, not fair for hands so small. Lest strength, less sense, most fearsome mix, make devils of us all. Pandora's box, once opened wide, cannot be shut the lid. Estrangement ever by our side, when uppermost is id. And suspect, the unknowable, whom we'd most desperate see, because this bitter cup brimmed full, he's just another me. So the regularity, the ability to anticipate what's getting ready to come makes it possible to memorize more easily than if you're dealing with a fixed poem, which is just not as easy. And another thing about fixed poetry is if it turns out that you've got a form which is well established, you can sort of live vicariously bask in the shared light of works that have gone before you. It was 30 years before I got around to buying a copy of Patterns in Poetry and saying, well, I wonder if that poem I wrote is an actual form or if it was just something that I've done and isn't really established anywhere. Well, it turns out it's one called hymnal measure, which means that a lot of the old classics in the churches are sung to that cadence, if you will. And so this poem can be sung to the tunes of, next slide, please. Prometheus, you found new fire, a fate revised in kind. Embrace the beast with wilding eye. Hope yours it does not find. And I got a real chuckle out of the fact that, okay, I'm writing about Armageddon, and it's being sung to that tune, and that's just so wrong. Next slide, please. It can also be sung to this one. The things of God's best left to them, not fair for hands so small. Less strength, less sense, most fearsome mix, make devils of us all. Yeah. Oh God, our help in ages past. So, let me check the time here. How am I doing? I got 9:04. Okay. So the last thing though, the downside to that is that even though the fact that you can, memorize and recite poems of the fixed variety more easily, relatively easily, and that you can sort of, ride on the coattails of somebody who did something similar previously. I mean, nobody's going to look at that and say, Amazing Grace. But subliminally, somewhere in the back of their mind, the cadence will probably kind of hit a nerve and they'll say, I like that poem. I don't know why. It's just something about it. So aside from those benefits, well, everything cuts both ways. For every benefit, there's a downside. The downside with fixed poetry is that even though it allows you to pursue perfection because you've got quantifiable things that you can count and actually point to and say, this is, quantifiably perfect. At the same time, it can start to demand perfection. And if you've got something that's a little out of place, everybody can see the warts. You can hide the warts in a free poem because you were 2 syllables long on line 12. It's like, well, I did it on purpose. But if it's here, maybe not so much so. So next slide, please. So what's the problem with these? Well, putting it under the microscope, if you want to do the full flex, and the next one, please. And these lines are going to be off, so my apologies. It got converted from Keynote to PowerPoint, and sometimes the graphics don't work. Anyway, if you want to dissect this under the microscope and see just what all went into it, it starts out with 6 stanzas. Next slide, please. Each of which is divided into 2 quatrains, 4 lines. Next slide, please. Each of which is divided into a couplet. And the first line of each couplet has, next slide, please, 8 syllables or 4 metric beats of 2 beats apiece. Next slide, please. And the second line of each couplet has 6. As for metric feet, the whole thing has only 1 foot in it, the I am, the ta-ta, 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 unstressed, stressed. So it's like, oh, that's a lot of I ams without having something kind of sneak in like the one guy did with his couplet. As for the rhyme scheme, it's, next slide, please. Another one. Yeah. Oh, I guess it took away my highlighting. Okay. Well, it's A B in the first 2. So the first couplet A B, and then A B repeated in the second couplet, and then in the third and fourth couplet C D C D, then E F G H, all the way up to W X W X. But it's a moot point because I couldn't get the color. I couldn't get 24 distinguishable colors, but there are no colors, so that doesn't matter anyway. And the more elements you incorporate, the higher the difficulty level. So the greater the potential flex. Like the vaudevillian spinning plates on the stage, the more you can balance, the greater the applause. Now, to caveat that, not all the elements are immediately apparent, so the writer won't get the full appreciation of everyone who reads it, and the casual reader won't get the maximum enjoyment. But the writer who also reads has a built-in audience, and the reader who's curious will find the most Easter eggs. So, yeah, to the curious go the spoils. And while the fixed poetry has the benefit of showcasing commitment to technical perfection, attention to detail, effort expended, the corresponding downside is it demands perfection. The author courts criticism when the warts are in plain sight. So next slide, please. Okay. So while for instance, while the first and second lines of the couplets are supposed to have 8 and 6 syllables respectively, in stanza 1, couplet 2, they only have 7 and 5. Now that's easily remedied with the addition of, next slide, please. Yeah, it didn't show up. The word just, I added the word just to line 3 and the word with, just lolling there in disarray with 3 heads all insane. So, okay, now it scans, which is a nice thing. But I chose not to. And I'm gonna tap dance fast, and it'll sound like justification, but it's rationalization. One of the hallmarks of poetry, in distinction from prose, is as relatively spare, lithe, fleet of foot. And these additions aren't necessary for the intelligibility of what's being conveyed, unlike the word own in that couplet, which is very necessary. They would increase the technical accuracy, but to my mind, decrease the artistic impact. As alluded to earlier, it can be tempting for writers and readers to sacrifice content to form when you're dealing with fixed poetry. All you can see is the rhyme. All you can see is the meter. You don't see the heart that's going on the page. Yeah, it can be tempting to let the tail wag the dog, and you gotta pull yourself back from doing that on occasion. It's the easy way out, and the easy way is usually not the best way. And then in the second stanza, yeah, next slide, please. See if this shows up. No, it didn't. In the second stanza, the first and sixth lines both have one extra syllable. Here again, it's an easy fix would be to substitute apostrophes for the most easily sacrificed syllables, the way I did in stanzas 3 and 4. But deleting part of a diphthong, and that's basically line 1, ingenious. It needs to be ingenious, but it's got that extra. And then in the third to last line, serious. Should be cirrus. I want it to just be 2. So I could put an apostrophe where the I is in both those words, but it's a diphthong. And so you look at that and you're like, that don't look like no contraction I ever saw. And you're right. And so it looks weird. And then that just pulls the reader out of the poem. And then they're like, well, let me get out the high-powered magnifying glass. And that's not what you want them to do either. So, and diphthongs straddle the line between voicing one sound, one syllable, or 2 sounds, 2 syllables. So it's sort of, it's in the gray zone. And as for the meter, next slide, please. Yeah, no, back up one, yeah. That'll be our last slide, the previous one. Okay. In the very first line, as far as the meter, the syllables are supposed to be paired as iams. Cerberus, in deep ken, lay, but the dog's name is Cerberus, not Cerberus, Cerberus. So I flipped that. It went from an iam to a trochee. But unless you're reading it like this all the time, it's probably not going to hit your ear that wrong unless you are doing that. And so most readers won't notice. And then in stanza 3, since same thing, got a wrong iam. Since prepositions are rarely emphasized, at first kin of is more natural than, no, I've got at first kin of long shadows cast, but it should be at first kin of. So that second iam is a trochee as well. So anyway, and this is getting kind of tedious, but the only last thing is that I was trying to make never repeat a rhyme, go all the way from A to X without ever repeating. But I used the long A sound in 3 different couplets, and I used the long E sound in 2. So, and these are things that your casual readers are not going to look at. But if they do, if they're looking for fault, whether through envy or boredom or whatever, they're going to find it if it's there. And if they do, send them $1 in the mail for, thanks for reading my work that carefully. I appreciate it, keeping me honest. So now, any questions? That's the end. Well, thank you all so much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. That was an absolute delight.